And I'm looking for Megan because I did hear Megan was coming. And I have not heard from Ken Mink. Oh, here's Megan. So Brent, I guess the only thing I would say is that if you are called out, just be sure to please give a high sign so that we know that you're not here, so that if there's a vote or something like that, we aren't expecting you to say something and you're not going to be there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just waiting to see if my admin assistant was going to join us. Jonna, I had her LinkedIn. Hold. Let's see.
Oh, so Lauren is here. Okay. So yeah, really the only regulars who are not here I'm not seeing are Ken Mink and Aaron. I don't believe either said anything about not being here, so maybe they're running a little late.
All right. Well, Dean, you want me to just go ahead and convene the meeting?
I would say it is in your court to do that, and that would be.
Well, I will do so to get the ball rolling. So I'll call this meeting to order. Lamoille Basin, March 27th, 2025. And then welcome and introductions. I think there's new faces, correct? We should do introductions or not? I think so.
Well, we are not likely to be short on time because, as I'll say I'll say now, the application that you had in your packet will not be up for a real discussion because they've made a request to basically put the review on hold. So
okay.
You certainly have time for introductions, and so.
All right, let's go around. Just remind each other. I'm Peter Danforth, President of the Board, Lamoille County Conservation District. And go ahead, Dean.
Well, I'll go next, and I can work from my screen
okay.
here.
Sounds good.
Dean Pierce staff. How about you, Brad?
Hi, I'm Brad Holden. I'm town administrator here in Underhill, Vermont, and I'm representing Chittenden County Regional Planning.
Okay. Alec, I'm going to go to you next.
Yeah. Alec Jones, transportation planner with LCPC.
Mel?
Hi, I'm Mel. I use she, her pronouns. I am with the Franklin County NRCD.
Thanks, Mel. Kyle?
Good morning, Kyle Grenier, transportation planner, Northwest Regional Planning Commission.
Nora?
Good morning, Nora Brown, Eco AmeriCorps member with the Northwest Regional Planning Commission.
Christine?
Hi there, I'm Christine Armstrong in Greensboro. I'm representing the Orleans County area.
Cliff?
Cliff Jenkins, water project manager at NRPC.
Megan?
Megan Rodier with Lamoille County Planning Commission.
Dan?
Dan Kahneman, district manager, Winooski Conservation District.
Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Weston. I'm the district manager for the Franklin County NRCD, and I use she, her pronouns.
Brent?
Brent Sheets, Director of Public Works, Town of Fairfax.
Aaron?
Good morning, all. Erin DeVries, Vermont River Conservancy Conservation Director, and I use she, her pronouns.
And I think the last person I have is Karen Bates.
Karen Bates, watershed planner for DEC for this area.
I think that's everybody, Peter.
Okay, great. Well, onwards then to meeting protocols, and I think I have them up here. Yes, so I'll go through Zoom norms and inclusive language. Introductions of all participants at each meeting, which I've just done. As possible, BWIC members should have their Zoom name and title, the following: name, organization, voting or alternate, and pronouns if desired. BWIC members are expected to have cameras turned on during the entirety of the meeting as technically possible. BWIC members are expected to stay focused, avoid multitasking, and follow the guidance of, if you wouldn't do something in an in-person meeting, I'm not doing it in a virtual meeting. BWIC members will use the raise hand function on Zoom to indicate a request to speak. Come off mute. This is an effort to make sure all of us are heard in turn. All members stay muted until called upon. If needed, QUISP staff may mute participants to avoid background noise. Any comments made in the chat will be read aloud at the appropriate time by the QUISP staff in full for public record. All right. And let's see, conflict of interest declarations.
I don't believe there will be any because the application came from someone and it's going to be someone outside the BWIC. And
Right.
like I said, it's going to be on hold.
All right, we have the agenda. I think if I heard correctly recently from someone that this is not something that needs a motion and the current Roberts rules. Is that correct? It's just an agreement.
The practice of the board has been to approve, but if you're the chair, so you get to decide.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's just if we can, is there any comments and if any need to edit this, please, raise your hand. Let me know. If not, we can move on to the meeting minutes, which will require a motion.
I move we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, is that Brad?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Do I hear a second?
This is Erin. I second.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Aaron seconds approval of last week's meeting minutes from January 23rd. All in favor of approving these, say aye.
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 All right.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, ayes have it. All right, public comment. Do we have anyone from the public who wants to comment? Okay, doesn't sound like it. So let's move on to report on budget adjustments as needed.
And there are none.
Love this meeting. All right. Let's see. Review is it application? So this is a review of application, which is
Yes. So as I said a few minutes ago, the request has been made to table or pause this application. There's been a hold up on some other things happening that are part of the timeline for the project. So they've asked for it to be put on hold.
okay. Is there any other projects that are up?
There was only one response to this round or this call for applications. So that means that there are no other application review activities that you need to do today.
Okay. Well, that means there's going to be plenty next time around.
Yes, and as I'll remind you all a little bit later, the next round is actually coming up fairly soon. So
oh, good. When is that?
That one opens, I believe, on April 3rd, if I have that date in my head correctly. I do have it written down. And yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll have something for you then.
Lauren has her hand up. Peter, I don't know if you saw.
Who's?
Lauren.
Lauren? Go ahead.
I feel stupid and I can never find the timeline for when application rounds are going to be open on the Quest website. And I know I've asked this before. I know it's been sent to me before, but could someone please send me where on the website this information is?
Yes, of course. And we'll put that in the chat, and maybe Cliff or Nora, you can just drop that in the chat, or I will do it momentarily. But yes, it's the simplest way is if you go to the main page and you search request for, if you start typing request for, you will see the page that has the requests for applications all there.
All right. What do we got going on here, Dean? You just jumped to another page, but then, oh, right. Transportation prioritization.
Yeah, if I may, Peter, I'll just
Yep.
set the stage a little bit before turning it over to Alec and also to Kyle. People may recall that at a last meeting, there were some comments that were made about how there's this very clear connection between transportation projects and water quality. Rivers in particular were mentioned. Some of the people that were part of the conversation, I believe, were Sarah, Erin, and Lauren. And so as part of that discussion, someone had suggested that the Basin Council hear about the process that VTrans uses to prioritize transportation projects. And so that's what we set out to do. And as Alec, who is the transportation planner at the LCPC, and Kyle, who's the transportation planner at the Northwest RPC, can explain, there is a role for regional planning commissions in the prioritization of projects. I'm not being very subtle or precise about it, as they will explain just what that role is and what the process is. And hopefully that will help answer the questions and maybe will result in additional discussion, or maybe not. I'll say that somebody might be thinking, well, why no person from VTrans here? We attempted to get someone from VTrans, and they can certainly it can be arranged for them to come to a future meeting. But like I said, the regional planning commissions are involved in this process and understand it pretty well. So it seemed like a good place to start. So if there aren't any questions before I turn things over to Alec, then Alec, why don't you take the reins, and Kyle, you can chime in as well. How does that sound?
Yeah. And Kyle, please feel free to chime in. You've been doing this a little bit longer than I have. So if I miss anything, just nudge in. But Dean did reach out to us a week or so ago looking for information on the state prioritization process. That's a process called VPSP2. I believe it started in 2020 or so. But our process at the RPCs is to work with our transportation advisory committees to create an internal list of projects in the county. Those are usually, large bridge projects, town and state bridge projects, large paving projects. And then the process would be to submit those to the state for acceptance into the capital program. That program hasn't been happening for the past 3 years or so. It hasn't been canceled, but it is on pause. And my understanding is it's on pause due to the amount of projects that they accepted in the first 2 years, which were focused on bridges and paving, I believe. The state does have a grading criteria for all these projects. I would encourage anybody to, go to the VTrans website. There's a large explanation of the process and grading criteria on the VTrans website. But they do take environmental factors into their scoring. And just given the conversation here, on a regional level, I've yet to see the towns really take environmental impact or water quality into consideration for the regional projects that I've seen come through. It usually is the price tag that sends projects onto our list, the larger price tag projects that our region would like to get on to the capital program. So I'm not sure if that's a good enough explanation, but I'm happy to take questions or hear from Kyle at this point.
I would just jump in to also note that on the scoring that Alec was referring to, there's also a section of the scoring that talks about resiliency, and that resiliency area does also take into consideration that flooding and extreme weather topic. So there are a couple of areas that do point to water quality. I think the other thing that I would also just jump in and say is that we, through the RPCs, kind of work through the silo of VTrans that is policy and planning. And we work with the district level a little bit too, but there are certainly many other silos of VTrans that have projects that come about, and we don't really have the information to know if there are other areas of the agency that are prioritizing or planning projects and how that water quality piece comes in. So certainly this is our little corner of VTrans, but as we all know, VTrans is very vast, and there's a lot of stuff that they do work on. And also just kind of to bounce back a little bit to kind of reiterate this prioritization process has been on hold for a few years. It is an area we're concerned about. Bridges in the bridge world especially, we don't have the opportunity to get these projects through. So certainly there is the water quality issue that we're facing that maybe not being addressed in a timely manner. But certainly the flooding that we saw for a couple of seasons also is a big reason that process has been put on hold. So many resources went to those emergency declarations that took some of the weight, if you will, away from these new projects that need to be factored into the capital plan.
Kyle, this is Ken Mink speaking from Georgia. Are you saying that you're opening up the application process again?
Nope. No, we have not been told that we have the opportunity to rank and submit projects to VTrans this year. It's still on hold.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was 10 minutes late to sign in here, but the other gentleman seemed to indicate that new proposals are being accepted.
No, so, and I apologize if I was misunderstood. We do at LCPC, we keep a running list of our priority projects with our TAC, but the state is not accepting additional projects at this time. So we keep an updated list just on our end for our own information, as well as if they ever, do reopen up the process, we will have our list ready and hopefully we'll be some of the first on that list. But
yeah, and we do the same thing at NRPC. We keep a list from concerns that come in from towns or TAC members or things that come up in conversations with other folks at the RPC. Those kind of get fed into that. And it's not ranked in any sort of official way. It's just, it's an area of concern with a little bit of information that we've compiled. So as Alex said, if we do get it's time, we'll also be ready.
Peter, there was a note in the chat. Mel might be able to elaborate. She was just asking, could you please share a link to the webpage you referred to where the prioritization project is shared? Yes. So,
Sorry, typo there. Prioritization of projects.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I can find that website and I'll drop it in there.
And I was just going to add a quick follow-up, which is there any mapping of these projects? Because sometimes people just, it may help them to understand their location, and are they mapped by any chance?
NRPC does not map ours. Do you mean projects, Dean, that have been accepted into the capital plan, or ones that we're kind of following for nomination?
Yeah, I guess I'm asking only about since the role of the regions is to assist VTrans by creating this prioritization, you make a list, and I'm just asking, does someone just plot those points on a map? Because if someone wanted to get a quick visual of where are those priorities, one of the challenges in all this is that, because I was looking at this earlier, this is the Lamoille Basin Council. And if you look at the map of the Lamoille Basin, it's in 3 or 4 different regions, and I don't know how many different highway maintenance districts. And so it gets complicated, but if they were shown on a map, it could be somewhat helpful to just get a big picture of, well, where are the regions saying the prioritizations are?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's mapped at a larger level, but certainly I could ask that question.
And I see Aaron's hand is up, Peter.
So this is Ken. One more question for Kyle. You say that there's, excuse me, you say that there's a list. How do you get on that list?
It's just an internal working document. And so like when I get emails from like you, Ken, that talk about areas that the town is concerned about, that ends up on my list.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, was Aaron trying to ask a question? I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Peter. And I think that's a great idea, Dean, about like it'd be neat to see dots on a map for the basin, just to kind of better understand what's on the list. I just had a bigger, broader question for Kyle and Alec about federal funding. Is there any like cause for concern? I mean, I think we all should be concerned right now, but just could you tell us a little bit more about what you think may be coming down the line or not coming down the line in terms of getting those priority projects like replacing bridges and whatnot in our state?
So a lot of those federal dollars for projects come through and directly to VTrans. And so they're kind of the experts on how that is going. And I know that they're trying to keep as close a pulse on that as possible. But I have not been in a meeting lately that's really talked about how they're feeling about those right now. So I don't know. I cannot answer that question.
It looks like Alec and Karen put in some links in the chat. I don't know if either of you want to clarify what those are.
Sure. I put in the chat the link to the VPSP2 website that has kind of the general state breakdown of the program and scoring criteria and the process. And there's a couple links to presentations in there that have been given throughout the years as well.
Great. Thank you, Alec. And then Karen, you put in the Vermont Transportation Resilience Planning Tool.
I have to unmute here.
thing?
That'll help. So anyway,
Oh,
so
okay.
so we've been meeting with VTrans to try to figure out how to, understand their planning processes and whether it's going to help us identify projects. And so the area where there's overlap is one when they do their planning process, their public planning process for an area, then we will be involved and let you all know when that's happening. Like last year or the year before, they were doing the Route 7 area in Milton. And so, and I know Kent Henderson was part of that. And so that's a good time to sort of understand where we can at least be together and talking about where there might be issues and what they could do, what we could do. And we'll try to, as a basin planner, we'll try to, our expectations is that we'll know about them and let you all know about them and when to get involved. The other part of it is they've got this Vermont Transportation Resilience Planning process in place. I don't know much about the resilience improvement plan itself. I was looking at it. I don't know if it's actually done, but they have a resilience planning tool which you can use, and you can basically get to the state, any level you want, town, whatever, it's an interactive GIS map, and it can show you where they have what's a hazard and what might be a priority. So for example, this isn't Basin 6, but MRBA is wanting to take out Sleeper Dam, and I wanted to get a sense of what they may have thought about hazards around that area. And so I could go in, and it said, yeah, the dam itself was a potential hazard, or the railroad was. Anyway, so what might be good is to have a presentation on how to use that, and then a discussion about how we might want to use it. But it definitely is a good tool to look at if you have know the area you're wanting to do road work in, and whether there's going to be some additional support because VTrans has identified it as resilience or needing focus to enhance flood resilience.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good tool. Thank you, Karen. All right. Any more comments, Dean? Did you have more to say?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up. I think it was on Aaron's remark about the federal funding. I certainly don't know anything in detail, but I was going to share something that I've heard mentioned by Catherine Dimitrick, the NRPC's executive director. As people may understand, the funding comes to states. A lot of funding comes to states from the feds through formulas. And I know that I've heard Catherine mention the possibility of there being some changes to the formula. And of course, if there's a change to the formula, that could affect how much funding there is, because the formula is used to divide up the pie. And then one piece of that is in transportation funding. I believe there's been something in the past that's referred to as the small state minimum. And I think it may be beyond transportation funding into other areas as well. But essentially, there's a formula and then it's applied. But in small states, that formula would produce such a small number. There's basically a minimum that's higher than what the formula, and the possibility has been floated, I guess, of changes to the small state minimum. So the sum total of that I take is that, yeah, we're in a time of uncertainty. And if there are particular pieces of it that you want to keep your eyes on, those are two things that you may want to pay attention to, because they could have implications for the funds that come to Vermont.
All right, thank you, Dean. Okay, and do we have any further discussion, or should we move on to the next item? Sounds like that's what we're moving to, Dean.
I think so. So that will bring us to, and this is a section of the meeting that Nora will be leading a lot of part of. So I don't know, Nora, do you have a set of your slides that you want to share? Or do you want me to share them? How would you like to do this?
I'd be happy to share them. I have them pulled up.
Okay,
Yeah.
floor is yours.
Can you see my slides? I guess they're not in present mode.
Yes.
So I just wanted to give a brief overview of operations and maintenance, and the required documentation and forms that you're expected to complete as part of any implemented projects. So, but before I get too into it, just to draw your attention to the fact that the O&M manual was just released, which you can find on DEC's website, and it just provides a really good overview of different kinds of maintenance activities that might be required for different kinds of implemented projects. And I'll start by going over some of the documentation that you're required to compile as a part of QUISP-funded projects. So depending on the amount of funding that you receive for your project, you'll either be required to fill out a site access license agreement or a site access easement. And so the easement agreement is for projects that receive over $200,000 in QUISP funding. And the idea there is that the site access is tied to the piece of land itself, and so it doesn't need to be renegotiated in the case of conveyance of ownership. Whereas a license, you would need to renegotiate with each new landowner. And so there are 2 new templates for each of these 2 types of agreements on DEC's website. They came out in October with a few additions. And so the document essentially allows DEC and the QUISP and your organization to access the landowner's property for the purposes of verifying and maintaining an implemented clean water project. And so what's new here with the new templates is that there is the addition of a plain language cover letter, which helps the landowner understand better what exactly they're signing, and the addition of what's called the landowner liaison role. So that's probably most likely going to be the organization that implements the project, but it can also be someone else in case the landowner has a preferred way to be contacted about this project. And the initial agreement term would be the same as a design life, and then you would be responsible for determining the length of automatic renewal. So the agreement automatically renews in perpetuity unless canceled within 180 days. Has to be canceled in writing within 180 days, or sorry, at least 180 days before the date of renewal. And the new template also creates a procedure for reporting conveyance of ownership and the notification of automatic renewal, which has to come within 90 days. And as I just mentioned, the circumstances for termination. So I made a little list here of what you as an implementer would be responsible for negotiating or confirming with the landowner. So that would be for the site access license or easement, you would have to designate someone or some organization as the landowner liaison, include your O&M plan in the license or easement agreement, which includes frequency of maintenance activities, what maintenance activities will be performed, and if any special equipment is needed. And it includes the note that to be occasionally reminding the landowners of the terms of the agreement and notifying the QUISP of ownership conveyance. And you would also be responsible for either performing those maintenance activities yourself or ensuring that they're completed if they are contracted out. And that includes reporting results and any expenditures to the clean water service provider. And then the clean water service provider would take those results and activities and report them to DEC using their reporting template. So verifications are another part of this process. So projects are required to be verified, I believe, 1 year after implementation, and verifiers are sent to the site to confirm maintenance activities are being performed properly and that the project are continuing to function. And these are not regulatory inspections. And there's a list of verifiers I can send in the chat too that is on DEC's website. You just go through a training and learn how to use these 2 verification checklists on Survey 123, just to go through the project and make sure that it's still working and take some basic measurements. And then DEC, the QUISP will submit this annual verification and maintenance reporting to DEC. And internally, NRPC has created this prototype tracking system, which has a few forms for you to document. First, every time you have an expenditure related to O&M, you would use this first form to submit that so we can keep track of how much has been spent. Form 2 will just ask you to confirm that you have notified the landowner of automatic renewal at least 60 days in advance of that date. And the third form is to provide the new contact information of a new landowner in the case that the land where your project is situated is sold or transferred. And again, that would be only relevant in the case of a site access license, which is for projects that receive less than $200,000 of funding. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I can share some links in the chat to some of these documents and templates momentarily. So, Lauren, do you have a question?
Hi, Nora. This was great. Thank you very much for this. I guess this is kind of probably more of a question for Dean, but I know we've been going back and forth about where like costs associated with requirements of permits that are required should go. And I don't know, Dean, if you have an update there, but I figured I'd throw you under the bus.
Yeah, so that's a question that I think is one that I have sent off to DEC for some reaction, and I don't believe I've gotten a response to. So, but I also have another meeting later today where I can ask some people how that's being handled. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna just say that it's something I have looked to DEC for some feedback on, and I don't think that I've gotten a clear response back. And what Lauren is referring to, I think, is something like the requirements of Corps of Engineers might have for inspections related to a dam removal, right?
That is specifically what I'm referring to. Yes.
Yeah. So I've just made this an addition to my to-do list to check back on the status of that. And Peter Peter, you're the chair, so you're.
Yeah, it's okay. So Nora, I had a question. It's the verification trainings. Do you have another session coming up? I started it last year, but I was so busy with other things I couldn't complete it. And so I have the apps and everything. I just wanted to know what I needed to do to, complete that.
I can definitely look into that for you. I believe the next step would be the field training if you haven't done that yet. And I don't know off the top of my head whether or when those are being planned for this year, but I can look into that and share that information with you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I do have to verify. I'd go to one of our sites this spring. So
right.
I'm trying to see if I can get all that handled quickly. But anyways, I'll keep in touch with you.
Hi, this is Ken. I can't find the raised hand signal. In any event, is the O&M expenditures an eligible cost for reimbursement?
I'll jump in there, Peter. So the quiz are going to be responsible for seeing that projects that have been funded or have been adopted are maintained and operated so that we can continue to get the phosphorus credit. So we will have funding for projects, but there's something in your question. It's likely that a project sponsor will kind of, at least for some initial period, be given the chance to be the operator and maintainer. So like if you did, I'll pick on your project that's not in the Lamoille Basin, but the Falls Trail project, if that were in our region, that would be something where an assessment would be made that, okay, as the sponsor for the project, you will continue to maintain it. And here's the kind of deal, here's the arrangement that the QUISP will have with you to pay for that, to reimburse you. So it is an eligible expense, but the system that was created is looking for cost effectiveness. And so it doesn't mean that in the future necessarily it will be the case where every project sponsor is automatically given the contract, so to speak, to do the operations and maintenance. It may be something where there's some comparison of costs and so on, but at least initially it's likely to be that the partner gets it. One of the big unknowns in all of this, though, is like, how much are these things going to cost? And frankly, we, until we get more experience, it's going to be hard to know. And we're all going to be kind of fumbling our way along to try to figure out what is a realistic amount of funding that should go towards operations and maintenance. I don't know if that helps, Ken. But if there wasn't a follow-up, I guess I just wanted to say I jotted down some notes when people were speaking, and I just wanted to see if I should come back to them. I was gonna just touch on something that is not in Nora's presentation that we are responding to, because we had a meeting, as Lauren knows, we had a meeting yesterday. The DEC Appendix B spells out the tasks that grant holders or subgrantees are to do for different types of projects. And for many of those project types, the preparation of a draft O&M agreement is one of the deliverables. And so that, and maybe for some other reasons, has had the QUISP operating where we are expecting a draft of the agreement to come from the project sponsor to us. But some of the feedback that we got yesterday is that, well, maybe the QUISP would be better positioned to start that drafting process. And I just wanted to share that that is something that we've heard and that we are going to be looking into making an adjustment to our current process, which is where we expect the draft to come from you. And instead, we might issue you an initial draft and say, okay, here's what it's looking like. This, I think, would be most important in cases where the QUISP is funding directly to implementation. So a project like a stream buffer planting hasn't had a preliminary design that would have had as a required deliverable a draft O&M plan. So anyway, it may be that it's in these limited cases where we start this first, but I just wanted to explain to people, if you've heard me say in other settings that it's going to be the partner organization that starts the draft, we're hearing that maybe the QUISP should do it. We haven't made any decisions yet, but we are investigating that.
Dean, I just want to circle back to something that Peter was saying, because I know that you have a verification coming up this year.
That's a good
And
point.
yeah, I
Yes.
think we had been discussing whether or not essentially, or you're allowed to verify your own project. And that's a question maybe that we haven't answered yet. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I guess I will have a conversation with you, Peter, if what you are thinking about is that you need to conduct a verification. If what you're referring to is 10 bends, you and I need to talk about who's going to be conducting that. Because I too, we understand that anniversary is coming up in May or something like that. So, and the verification is supposed to happen within 1 year.
Right. Well, there's the landowners who I planted with, right? So I'll get right to the details of it. So maybe perhaps I could turn, one of my main contact, maybe they could also become a verifier, if they were trained. I don't know. Or someone outside of it, but the only problem is as you said with buffer plantings, there's no design per se, but there is a number of trees. There is a expectation on survival rate or not, and so whoever verifies goes in, right, and determines, oh, you need to, based upon the survival rate, maybe replant a certain number of stems, right? And then would those, and going back to Ken's question, if you verified and you figured out that you needed to spend so much money to, maintain this project, would then we invoice the QUISP to refund that through the maintenance fees? Does that make sense? It's like a direct correlation I'm trying to make to all these questions.
Yeah. So your project is the first that we have been involved in at this stage in either basin. So you're going to be a laboratory for what we do. So what I think is going to probably happen is that sometime before the verification deadline is that we're going to need to take a look at the site to see where things stand and get some idea of, well, how did everything fare, and essentially score it, so that we'll have some understanding of what the costs might actually need to be. Are they going to be a little, or are they going to be a lot? And then we can take care of the awarding of an agreement that would say, yep, this is the maintenance that's required, and you can be reimbursed for those expenses.
Okay, so it's almost as if we're having a new agreement with the
There will
maintenance
be an
element.
agreement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there will be.
Okay.
There will. I'm sorry if that hasn't been sufficiently clear, but there will be an agreement that will be struck for the for the deal that's made for the operation and maintenance. And so what I was trying to say earlier when I said that, at least initially, it would be that we're going to sign deals with the project's implementer or the sponsor, an organization like yours, to have that role. The thing I'll just say about the verifiers is that it's, the guidance DEC has created is really looking at avoiding conflicts of interest, and having whoever's verified be unbiased. So, the idea of the people that do the project being the ones that verify it, it's kind of not really tenuous. So that's something. And then also I'll just say is that it's DEC that runs the verification process. The QUIS don't control when the training will be. So yeah, hopefully Nora will come back with an answer that says there are going to be a lot of sessions, and there are going to be plenty of opportunities for people to get the verification, but we don't control it.
Yeah, it looks like they haven't decided on any dates yet. It just says under development for those field trainings for 2025. But I will keep an eye on that.
Okay, thank you.
I just see in the chat that Lauren asked like 10 minutes ago. Sorry that I'm just seeing this, but to share something with the whole BWIC. I want to make sure I know what.
That was like the O&M and verification links about what people need to do to be qualified. I think
Yes.
Peter had asked for them and you said you sent them to him. So I was just saying, can you send them to all of us?
Yeah, I can do that. I sent the list of the current verifiers, the doc, that's just a PDF, but I will send the other information too.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, Dean, did you
I was
want to
just-
continue on? Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna ask, I didn't know if people had any questions about easements versus licenses. The licenses are kind of the less onerous type or less locked in type of agreement. We are told that we're to require easements in the case of projects over a couple $100,000. The exceptions to the easement requirement exist for when the project implementer is a state agency, but unfortunately, that doesn't mean folks like municipalities, even though a municipality is a local government, a public body, there is still an easement requirement that comes into play. And that's something that we have pursued, and that's been the answer back. So we have not seen any greater flexibility on easements that exceed the cost threshold. And really, you know, a main difference between the easement is that it's really a permanent thing. It stays with the property if the property's sold, so forth.
But in our case, the easement was part of the application. It had nothing to do with the O&M. Am I off base there?
Well, we're talking about a peculiar type of easement that is for the purpose of providing access to the site. So you might have a project that is a conservation easement, and that wouldn't be entirely separate from this. The thing that we're talking about are documents that are meant to ensure that access to the site will continue. It's not a conservation easement. Does that help, Ken?
No, but I'm saying that was part of the application process. It had nothing to do with O&M. In other words, when we applied for the monies, the site access agreement was part of that package, unless you guys are doing it differently.
Okay, so now I'm understanding. Yeah, and this is, and I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but the list of required items that DEC has for different project types includes a draft site access agreement. And so that's part of the reason why we as a QUIS in Northwest Vermont have been saying, yep, the way that we're going to do this is that it is going to be the party that's doing the project to develop the draft. So yes, you're right. In your projects, you're remembering that you had to work up this draft site access agreement. And then eventually, before the project was done, a signed and executed version one. You're right. That is part of the project. We are talking about the same thing. And in your case, you're remembering it starkly, and it needed to happen before the project was done. And I'm just talking about how in our basin, we might, at least for those projects that are coming just for implementation funds, not for design funds, which was the case for yours, we might be the ones who are going to initiate that very first draft. We haven't decided that, but we are hearing that, hey, it would be really helpful if that's how it works. So we're going to look at it.
Let's see, was it Brad or Mel who had their hands up first? I kind of missed that sequence.
Brad had his hand up first.
Okay. Go ahead, Brad.
I was just curious, with these easements, if anybody's encountered any problems with, as with any encumbrance of a property, it should be cleared through people's mortgage companies. because they don't really have carte blanche just to issue an easement. And I'm just curious if anybody's found problems getting mortgage releases from people, mortgage companies.
I'll jump in, Peter, and say,
Yep.
I can ask people at DEC. This is also new. That, I mean, I don't know whether or not there has been a single easement required in the QUISP funded era.
Yeah,
So
I'm
I don't know.
curious too, who drafts these easements. I'm sure it's an attorney and they get recorded in land records, but in order, like I said, with any encumbrance, I'm putting my retired land surveyor hat on here, but any encumbrance on a property, the landowner may not have exclusive right to grant that easement in perpetuity. So I was just curious. I've noticed a trend here with mortgage companies being quite difficult releasing their interest in order to either convey a small piece of property or convey a right of way or an easement. So just curious.
Yeah, I'll just say that the form that is used came from DEC and was very carefully, heavily scrutinized by an attorney there. And so that's what we're told to use. But in terms of the implications of having done that, yeah, that's a good question, because someone could just sign this and then we could all find out later that, oh, there's some kind of issue with this because it's a project, that's a property that has a mortgage on it.
Yeah, happens all the time. So
Tell me about it. Mel.
Sure. I'm just curious about the $200,000 threshold of state funding and like what that really encompasses. Like, is it just QUISP funding or is it anything from the state? And then would it be for all project phases, including project development?
Yeah, I think the phrase is state resources. I'm going to pull this up if you give me just a second, but I believe it's the entirety of the costs, the entirety of the state's investment in the project, and that's the threshold. But if you can give me a second, I'll try to come back to that. Hold on.
Brad, do you still have your hand up or? Okay, Dean, did you find what you needed to find?
I'm gonna see if I can get the answer to that question, but state funds invested in the project. Yeah, I'm going to follow up with something, but
I'm looking at the Clean Water Service Provider Guidance document, Chapter 7. And that says $200,000 or more of state funds invested in implementation.
So just specifically toward implementation.
yeah, so this is something I would want to get it in writing from DEC, because in so many of the things that we're doing, we're being asked to look at the full costs. And so we're going to need to get clarification whether or not implementation just means from the implementation phase on, or if it means more than that. So that's what we're going to have to do to get a clear answer, or unless it gets uncovered, with me and us having a little bit more time. But as far as the resources, I'm pretty sure, Mel, that it's if they're state of Vermont dollars, because that's what the words say. It doesn't say, and maybe this is something that will be clarified in the next version of the funding policy. it doesn't do what the funding policy does elsewhere, where it specifies the reporting, the reporting agencies as well. So it would make some sense to limit it to reporting agencies, but it doesn't do that yet.
Okay, so do we want to maybe circle back to this and then move on to the next item? Unless someone wants to continue to ask questions. All right. Yeah, it sounds like we can sort of move along, Dean. Let's see, where are we at? Is this where we're doing the O&M document? Is that project sharing? Oh, project sharing, right. Project sharing.
I can give a quick update on a project we're doing out in Fairfax. So I think maybe last meeting we talked about this briefly, but in December, Sarah Had from the town of Fairfax contacted us about a QuIS-funded project, stormwater project at Bellows Free Academy, Fairfax, that had completed final design. It came in significantly under the budget that they requested for final design, and she was seeking to transfer the remaining funding to the implementation phase. She was leaving from a role at town of Fairfax at the end of January and was just trying to get that wrapped up. Dean let her know that we still needed a few items from her before closing out the design phase, including a signature from Scott Dillon with VDHP saying there would not likely need to be an ARA at the site. Watershed Consulting, who had designed the project, reached out to Scott, who then let us know that an ARA was likely necessary. There was historically observed Native American sites along the stream next to Hunt Road. So obviously this was going to extend the timeline and budget significantly. So Sarah then left. The interim town manager doesn't really seem to be in a position to take this project on, doesn't have the capacity for it. So I'm trying to pick up some of that. I'm going out for a site visit later today with Scott. Scott says there are areas in need of review west of Hunt Road. There's no use in trying to avoid an ARA, but gonna try to see if there's any potential to turn this into a gully project since the design already treats upstream flow. And that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one clarification though, Cliff, I thought I heard you say like our, or maybe something, it is still the town of Fairfax's project, but we're trying to help them, but it is their project.
Right, yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, any other project updates? Okay, I'm not hearing any. I don't have any more updates for our projects currently, but
This slide is meant to imply other types of updates. So
okay,
I don't want there to be confusion. Brent has his hand up.
Brent.
I was just going to say real quick to Cliff, if he needs another point of contact, I know I'm in constant contact with Sarah. So if there's anything maybe I can do on my end to help or meet up or anything like that, I'll be more than willing to do that.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that, Brent. I'll write that down.
So if you need to stop at the town office, I'm here. I'll be here late anyway. So, but if you need something, don't hesitate to let me know.
Great, thanks.
I guess I have an update. I think the only person aware of what I'm about to talk about is Megan. So if I know there's not a lot of people here from Lamoille County, but we're going to be holding a community forum, climate resiliency workshop for Oxbow Park in Morristown, if anyone is interested on that. So that's going to be May 3rd. I have yet to advertise for it because I'm still trying to find the location for presentations and the panelists that we're going to invite. I almost have the panel list complete. So essentially, this meeting will be about the future of Oxbow. We're going to try to rank out what's important to the public in regards to that section. And we feel like it's a really great place to start with some of the community forums we plan to do throughout Lamoille, because it's just, for one, it's a place where people have different ideas. And we want to kind of try to build consensus on what is possible to happen at a place that frequently floods and is supposed to be a public park. So, out of this, we're hoping that we can, inform and educate the public on floodplain restoration and flooding dynamics in general, and how one town may affect the other town through its use of development and its planning. And so I'll be working pretty close with the Planning Commission as well. Megan, who's represented here, and the engineers who are doing work in the vicinity to do some floodplain restoration work. So that will be on May 3rd. I will advertise probably by next week, the first advertisement, as soon as I find a location for where we're going to at least have presentations. The second half of the meeting will be an actual going to the park with the group that's present. We'll probably have a cleanup, maybe a couple other projects that people can do hands-on and just refamiliarize themselves with Oxbow Park, and specifically the lower deck, they call it. There's 2 levels to the park. The lower deck, which gets inundated by flooding on a regular basis. The upper deck as well, but there's a little bit more development there, and there's a bandstand, I think a soccer field, etc. So I think it just, for even if you're not from the area, I think it's going to be a good thing to attend, just so you can see what a community forum looks like in regards to planning for and development in an area and trying to build consensus. I know a lot of the districts have been trying to have these forums, and we're a little bit new to the game, but we're attending a few of them, and we're creating a few of them, and I think it's really exciting. I think the conservation districts are one of the few watershed groups that actually represents a county-wide base. And so I feel like it may be our duty, in a sense, to have these forums to create consensus on development patterns, and when it has to do with natural resources specifically. So I will get that information out to you all as soon as I can. That will be probably next week. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi. This is Peter. This is Erin, and I can't raise
Hey,
my
Erin.
hand because I'm driving. Hi. I'm really happy to hear that you're putting together that community forum or forums for this spring. And I would love to just touch base with you.
Yes.
I don't know, after the call or sometime really soon, because Vermont River Conservancy, as I've mentioned during these meetings in the past, we have a big scoping grant that we're working on in the Lamoille Basin, and
Okay.
we're putting together meetings as well. So I don't know, specifically if we need to come to that meeting, although I'm now thinking, oh yes, I'd like to be there to learn a little bit more about that, how you put those forums together. But anyway, I just want to say I'd love to touch base with you as soon as possible. And
Okay.
just talk a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, Erin, I've actually, you were the missing link. I wanted to see if you were, you or someone from your organization would want to be on the panel.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's one
That
question.
sounds
So
great.
think about that. And then also there was some other lingering question. What is it? God, I just can't. Okay, no, that's the most important question. But when I think of the other one, I'll touch base with you.
Okay. Yeah. Give me a call anytime, Peter. Talk
Okay,
soon.
great. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks so
Hey,
much.
Dean. Yeah, good luck. Dean?
I'm not sure if it would go under this or the next round, but I will be mentioning some project that I probably should have had more information about, but it's making it seem like there's almost an embarrassment of riches of work that's going on in Lamoille. are there any other project updates? Because if not, then I will just jump into what is not strictly speaking a QUISP project update. But it's related to the Lamoille Basin and some of the things that you and Aaron were just talking about. So
Sure.
yes.
Go ahead.
So so there is currently a study going on, and folks at Lamoille who are on may also be familiar with this. I'm looking at you, Megan. Economic Development, Federal Economic Development Agency. This is not my project, but there is work going on that's building on previous modeling work that was organized by LCPC. And there's another phase of work that's going on, and I believe it's SLR consultants who are doing that study. So there's additional Lamoille River modeling work that is underway, but there's also a public meetings component as well. And I was just going to be mentioning that I'm aware that meetings in the town of Georgia and Fairfax are being pulled together, I think sometime in the next month or so. Sean Coleman in my office is the person who's got the lead on that for the towns in my region. But maybe Megan, you know who is organizing it. Maybe it's a Seth thing. But the bottom line is that there's actually another process and other meetings going on involving the Lamoille Basin, discussing flood resilience, economic recovery. The funding for this project did come through the Northern Borders Regional Commission, I believe, which has a strong economic development aspect. And so there are meetings with businesses and looking at things like resiliency plans for businesses and so forth. I'm going to do a better job getting information out about this project to you all as WIC members, because it is something that, again, I'm not directly involved in, but I think would be of interest. And I unfortunately don't have a clear calendar on it, but we will try to get you tapped into those things as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. Seth Jensen from our office is the lead on that. And I think he's in the process of organizing some of those meetings related to the modeling. And yes, SLR is the consulting team that has been hired to basically build on the previous Lamoille River flood modeling, but then also kind of model other areas that were left out last time. You know, and in terms of the areas that were modeled previously, they're kind of going to be running, you know, different scenarios related to, you know, projects that are happening now, and just, you know, there's some areas that communities are kind of honing in on, you know, that they're concerned about and want more refined modeling. But yeah, if you have any other questions, I'd say reach out to Seth Jensen from our office. I know he's working on organizing some of those meetings, and hopefully we'll have more of a firm dates and calendar on that soon.
Yep. We will be working with Megan in that particular arena and there are other areas of Lamoille as well. And we have flood modeling, hazard mitigation grant funds that we're applying for next month for 2 areas of Lamoille. So it is a very active moment when it comes to floodplains. Okay.
Time for other updates, because I had a few, Peter.
Yeah.
I will roll through quickly. Of course, if there are questions, please ask. Something that I wanted to update people on is the issue of cost effectiveness threshold. This is something that the Basin Council has had some conversations about in the I guess almost now distant past. And there have been some ongoing internal conversations at the QUISP about this. And so what I wanted to update folks about, and I will be sending out a copy of the about to be signed policy, but the Regional Commission is almost at a point where the director, Catherine, will sign a policy having to do with thresholds. And what it would do is a couple of things. It would respond to something that DEC has been asking QUIS to think about doing, and that is to establish a threshold. And it could be very useful in giving guidance to someone who's thinking about making an application and help them decide whether or not they really want to apply for QUISP funds or instead might want to consider some other source of funds. So for example, the Fish and Wildlife application that had a cost effectiveness of more than, I don't know, something like $60,000 a kilogram initially, that's an example of a project where maybe if we had had something other than a flashing yellow light, maybe a red light or a green light about should you be applying to the Basin Council and the QUISP for funding, or should you be looking at some other source? So the goal is that a policy like this would help people understand which route they should go. So there will be a threshold, it'll be in the form of a policy. And after looking at similar policies that other QUISPs have set up, not all QUISPs have set up these policies, but several of them have. What Catherine is looking at is a policy that would say the cost effectiveness has to be at least $50,000 per kilogram for a stormwater project. Stormwater projects are traditionally more expensive, and then $30,000 per kilogram for other types of projects. But of course, that's recognizing some projects may have partial funding, and that could come into play, and we will certainly recognize the advantages when the other funding sources can make a project more cost effectiveness. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that it will have language in it that allows for the special exception. If there's something really remarkable about a project, it doesn't meet those thresholds, that it might still be possible to run it through the pipeline. So I wanted to give that as an update and let you know that within the next week, I'm guessing I'll have that sent out to folks. It may be as soon as tomorrow, but it probably won't be more than a week. Megan has her hands up, and I don't know if it's about this or.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Dean. I mean, from my experience, you know, things like floodplain restoration projects tend to be a little more expensive than even, you know, kind of stormwater projects, you know, like, you know, for example, like a small underground infiltration chamber system. So I'm just curious, why are we setting a higher threshold for stormwater projects and not say like floodplain restoration projects, for example, when those tend to cost more but yield a lot of benefits in the end?
Well, the answer I would give is that it's the number for all projects in some of the other basins is more in the neighborhood of $30,000, and I believe it's in the Memphremagog Basin where they have the second allowance for stormwater projects that's 50, and the threshold that we're thinking is lining up with theirs. The data that's been generated, it's somewhat out of date, is indicating that stormwater projects cost more. The amount of funding that comes to the QUISP for different types of projects doesn't necessarily reflect what you're saying, that those river projects would be as expensive or in the same kind of league of expense as stormwater projects. It could be that as data comes in, then there's some reason to put, you know, I don't know if we want to create a third category, but for now, this is the structure. And like I say, I think the important thing is that the funding that's distributed to the Basin Council is distributed based on costs, and the river type project costs are not nearly as high as the stormwater project costs. So that's just the logic that's embedded in this scheme is that stormwater projects cost more, and so if we're going to do them, the threshold would be higher.
is there opportunity to revisit this maybe once more, say, newer floodplain restoration projects have been implemented? Because I'm just thinking, you know, Peter and I, obviously in other conservation districts, we know how much some of these things are costing nowadays, and it's a lot different than it, you know, say 2 years ago even. So is there maybe an opportunity to revisit this policy at some point?
Yeah, I would say I think so. And it's these are policies, they're not laws. So, and even laws can be amended, but if they're policies, so a policy is meant to help guide decision making. I wanted to say also that the river projects are touted as being, maybe they're expensive, but they're also touted as being good at phosphorus reduction. So I guess, you know, we do want to see what the cost effectiveness, an expensive project is not the same as one with a high cost per kilogram. So, I mean, these projects that may cost a lot of money, that does not equate to poor cost effectiveness.
Right, and we might still, as a Quest, be able to at least support like design planning on them. You know, on floodplain restoration projects. But yeah, I appreciate you just keeping that in mind, though. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I've some opinions about that, but I'm not. It's going to be a long conversation. Ken, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just was curious, Dean, in the other basin that you manage, have you floated these same numbers?
We're going to be sharing this same update next Wednesday.
So you're proposing the same thing for both basins?
So that's a question to you, Dean, I think.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was unmuted. So yes, what I was trying to say is that the same report will be given to the Missisquoi Council next week. And what I said after that was that, what did I say after that? I said something else after that, but it's just escaped me. So.
Okay. Did you have another update, Dean?
Yes. So if I can just quickly go on the I just wanted to follow up something that was emailed. Karen Bates had suggested bringing this to the attention of the basin councils, and we're doing this. So I just wanted to spend a second following up that email, which transmitted a copy of the memo that was prepared for the Addison County Regional Planning Commission, which is the QUISP for the Otter Creek. So basically, if people didn't understand it, the Act 76 rule, so-called, set up a system of clean water service providers, and it basically created a schedule that said when the initial assignments would need to be renewed. And it was staged so that not all would happen at the same time. It's really just to manage the workload. So Addison RPC, as the clean water service provider, was the first of any of the clean water service providers that had to undergo the process of review before its assignment as the clean water service provider would be renewed. And the memo that I transmitted in the email documents what happened there. So again, Karen thought this would be informative, and I agree. So that's what that memo does. The assignment period for the Lamoille and the Missisquoi basins both happens to be, I think we're among the last ones to be in the cycle. So the work would be happening, roughly a year from now, leading up to June of 27, which is if the renewal is given, that's when the renewal would occur. I won't get into or even try to get into all of the different factors that DEC considers in the review process. There's a specific chapter of guidance that deals with this, but hopefully that gives people a little bit better understanding of, well, what is this memo and why did Dean send it to me?
Ken.
Yes, Dean, could you just float some numbers about where the Lamoille Basin sits right now?
I can, if you can give me a second. Yeah, I don't have that one up, but if, so actually, if it's okay, I will go pull up that spreadsheet, but the last item updates was to hear something that Nora can address, which has to do with some efforts that are happening at the DEC level about communication. So how does that sound?
Sure.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about this, and Karen is also involved if she wants to jump in at any point. But I'm part of a working group with a few folks at DEC working on creating some communications for the QUISPs to use to essentially drum up more support for projects. And I'm just going to pull up our template right now so that I can tell you what we've been working on. But we've been working on a communications plan to create some materials for both the QUISPs and partner organizations to use to educate the public on what exactly this funding program is and how they can access it and get projects implemented on their land. So a lot of what at least I've been hearing in some meetings with organizations, with watershed groups, is a frustration that essentially the public doesn't have a great understanding of this program, and it would be great to have some materials to help with that education component. So we're working on at first creating at least some general fact sheets that could be used to explain to the public sort of the basic components of the QUISP as a source of funding and how it might address certain natural resources issues on their land. And I think a second component would then be a general public outreach campaign, front porch forum, social media, things like that. But essentially just to give folks like who to contact, direct them to a centralized page on DEC's website that provides you with that information of, based on your location, who is your QUISP and what types of projects might they be able to fund, and that it's non-regulatory and that it would be covered by this funding program and not at cost to the landowner. Just sort of basic information like that I think has been a missing component of the rollout of this program. So that's my update. There's not a ton that's actually been created in terms of materials yet, but we have a good plan. We're getting started. I'm getting started like right away on creating some of those fact sheets. So yeah, that's sort of what I have. If anyone has any suggestions or requests, I would love to hear from you. Megan?
I think that's a great idea, and I'm glad to hear, Nora, that you're working on that. I guess I would suggest on the fact sheet, you know, if the QUIS does sign this new phosphorus reduction threshold policy into place, to have that be clear on the fact sheet, you know, what the thresholds are for phosphorus reduction, and maybe link people to the FFI tool and the DEC interim phosphorus calculator as well. That way Peter and I and everybody don't have this swarm of people contacting us being like, hey, can we do this? And I just want it to be clear that there's some restrictions.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But yeah, glad you're doing that. It's great.
That's good. Aaron, did you come off mute? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm almost in Montpelier, folks. Great suggestions, Megan and Nora. Thanks for putting those together. I don't know if you've been in touch with the Winooski WIC folks, but they last fall put together, so Brian Boyd and Lincoln, I forget Lincoln's last name, put together sort of like this tour that they were going on and put together outreach materials. So you might want to be in touch with them. It was for the public. It was for towns. They were specifically going on their tour to towns to kind of just share a little bit more about how the QUIS and the WICs could be involved with applying for projects.
That's great to know. Thank you, Erin. I'll reach out to Lincoln.
Welcome.
Ken?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right time to ask this, but I had exchanged a bunch of emails with Dean about a culvert issue on Silver Lake Road, and he was gonna give it over to Cliff, and I was wondering if any progress was made there.
Yes, I have submitted a application for expedited project development funds, and that is where we're at with that.
Oh, real quick, Mel's leaving. Are you still here, Mel? You had a question before I wanted to get to. Is it per kilogram per year? And I think you're referring to those prices, that $30,000 and $50,000, correct?
Mel left, but yes, that was her question.
Okay, is it answered?
I believe so.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the kilograms per year number that we are all wrestling with these.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure she wasn't forgotten. I was trying to get to her. All right.
So I do have a spreadsheet that I can show for people in answer to Ken's question. So I'm going to share this right now. So what this spreadsheet does is show projects that have been through the Basin Council and that have had a contract. Now, I realize that this one was put in preliminary, and this is the one that's been withdrawn. So I'm just taking care of that. The target for the Lamoille Basin is around 40 kilograms a year, but year is not the right way to describe it. It's really contract year, and a contract is really more the period of time it takes to spend the funding, and we are still in the first funding round, which is about, well, we're getting close to that amount, but we have not exceeded it. So we're still in the first year. So we have, in theory, about 141 kilograms of phosphorus reduction, but those are not in the bank, so to speak, Ken. So we're not treating them like they are a sure thing, because as we have found with some projects, for example, a strategic wood addition project that was initially at 10 has been adjusted down. Now, this was in at 11 when it came in. So it was initially 10, then it was 11. And I know that there's a lot of work ongoing, but it might be 3 or 4. So if it ends up being 3 or 4, then it's going to represent essentially a previous overstatement of the amount of phosphorus. So while we have a really strong project with 80 kilograms, we are not treating that like 80 kilograms in the bank, because the proof is when the projects are in implementation and phosphorus calculation estimates have updated, and it's really more of a sure thing. But at a high level, we're doing well, and it's really because of a couple of big projects that have good phosphorus reduction indications at this point. Does that help you?
So are these, this list is not implemented projects, is that what I'm getting?
That's right. These are all of the projects that have been through the WIC and have been the subject of an agreement and that have phosphorus estimates at various stages of refinement. And really the only one that's been booked now is one planting project. So those are the only real, in a sense, the only real bankable credits. Peter, do you see Lauren's hand?
Lauren, sorry, I was muted.
I guess this kind of to Ken's point, I think. I'm wondering how it works if like the QUIS funds a design, but we go get implementation funds elsewhere. Like that's definitely gonna happen. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
My thoughts are is that it shouldn't happen with they shouldn't happen over the objections of the QUIS because the task awards have a line in them that says that the partner is gonna the awardee is going to work with the QUISP on the implementation. So we understand that it could happen. There are some projects in the very early days, like the BFA Fairfax one, where the way things have turned out, it doesn't have good phosphorus, and we probably wouldn't want to pay for implementation of the entire project, or we wouldn't want to pay the full price. But we're not so formal as to say that the QUISP has the right of first refusal, which is something that I've heard somebody at DEC suggest, that's how it could be worded. But we do want, we don't want to invest in something and then have it all walk away. So we're not going to be uncaring about it, because if we are making an investment in a project that's got some good phosphorus, we don't want those phosphorus credits going someplace else if we've made the project advance.
Dean, is that in like the task award notifications or in the overarching agreement? Because that's news to me. I apologize if that's news to me. Definitely my fault.
It may be kind of an innocuous looking line that I'm referring to, but if you give me a second, then I will try to find an example.
You're not alone, Lauren. Some of these I'm completely unsure of as well. Specifically, since I was one of the ones that sent in a stormwater project that probably wouldn't be funded in the future because of its phosphorus credit, but we'll see about that.
Yeah, and I will be the first to admit that when we were just getting started, there was an interest in getting our feet wet, so to speak, and we were not looking at things in quite the same way that we're looking at now.
If the QUIS still claim some phosphorus credits though, like if it's like Lauren's saying, like the QUIS is helping fund some design planning, but then we recognize the project is just like a big project and some other funding source has to fund the implementation because of the amount of money we're talking about. Can't QUIS still claim those credits? Because you contributed, the QUIS still would have contributed to the overall project.
Yes.
Good question.
I believe if the other funding source, I think the answer is that we might be able to claim a portion of that. I haven't had that question or heard that suggestion, but we might be able to cover or claim a portion. It would likely be small, but I think we might be able to do that.
Especially if the funding source for implementation was like a non-reporting agency too, right? Then you could possibly claim it all.
Right, that would have it be something that is handled through an adoption, and then the adoption process has some of its own restrictions, and so, you know, there's a cap on what percentage of the phosphorus reduction target that can be made up of adopted projects, and there are some limitations on where the funds that paid for that project could come from. So yeah, there is a little bit of a gap between the reality, the cold hard reality of adopting projects and what might seem the case at first glance. But I'm trying to find an example of the wording. I have not, not ignoring Lauren's question. So that.
Ken, do you still have your hand up, Ken, or is that? And you're muted. You're muted. Ken, if you're trying to say anything, you're muted, just so you know.
So Peter, I thought you folks had implemented a project, but Dean said that list was projects that had not been implicated. Am I off base there?
Not completely. We have completed one implementation, and the rest have just come out of design and are ready to go for implementation, or at least some of them for next year, this coming season.
So to address Lauren's question, the language that I'm referring to is this paragraph here. By accepting the subgrant award, partner agrees to work with the QuIS to identify the most appropriate source of funds for project implementation and or operations and maintenance.
Heard. I guess that has never been how I interpreted that line. I'm not saying anything about that, but that would have probably been good to have called out a little bit sooner, and maybe can just be a little bit more explicit in the subgrant agreements. I'm happy to do that. It was just I didn't know that I was supposed to be doing that, if I'm going to be really honest.
Yeah, I mean, the appropriate source of funding could be a different source of funding for implementation. That's kind of how I would interpret that. And we do identify, you know, in our applications,
Yep.
we do identify in our applications, there's a question about how do you know, something about sources of funding and how might you implement this project. And a lot of us identify the fact that, well, this is a larger scale project and we will need to seek other funding sources for implementation.
True. Is that in the project ID portion? That's what I just did the other day. It asks you how many other grants could you apply to, and then when you do it, you click on 4 of which don't exist anymore. You know, it's kind of funny actually.
Yeah, it's in the main application.
Yeah. Okay, where are we at? We're at 10:43. I guess, you know, we still have time, but do we want to move on, Dean, or do you have more to say about this update?
I think we are at the point where we can just announce what the next meeting dates are, and the fact that the next funding round opens up on April 3rd. The deadline's May 8th. May 8th. And we're still looking for a second representative in the watershed organization sector.
I'm sorry how that's going, Dean. I mean, I put it out there and people are just not very responsive. I guess you gotta like chase them down. But we're currently looking at the Paddlers Club, correct? That's
and so it may be that we need to try to get together with Lynn again, maybe pull in Chris Rotler from DEC and or Karen or something like that as another step.
Yeah.
So I
I'll
think-
reach out to Noah again, though. I'll just put a note out to him, hopefully. Yeah. Anyways, next meeting, May 22nd. Does that work for folks? Looking at my, ooh. There is a VACD full board meeting that same day, around the same time, just so you know.
Okay, well.
That
let's-
affects us in the conservation district. but,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
that's a good thing to know. So we may end up sending out what alternative dates would work.
I mean, does it always have to be in the morning?
It does not.
I mean, that afternoon, could potentially work after at 2 for us.
Yeah, since some people have dropped off the call, then I think what we need to do is just send out an alert if you have a conflict that day.
Okay, well, we're good for the afternoon if you want to send out that option and to people.
Starting at
2.
At 2. Yeah, moving it ahead might start to be challenging just because it less time to review the things that are due on the 8th, but we'll get something out.
Okay. So you'll get something out, and then we'll also talk later about, finding this other watershed organization, Dean. And I guess that's it. So are we ready to make some motions to adjourn, or is that where we're at?
I think so.
Dan Kahneman will move to adjourn.
All right, Dan, I recognize Dan Kinnaman making the first motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second, this is Erin DeVries.
Okay, I hear a second from Aaron to adjourn the meeting. All in favor of adjourning today's meeting, say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. The ayes have it. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good luck.